Stop talking.
Nice. Oh, sorry.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Today's roundtable from Project Roundtable is going to be all about how Hangouts can transform teacher collaboration. My name is Ben Wilkoff. I am the Director of Personalized Professional Learning in Denver Public Schools, and I'm super excited to have a panel of folks to talk about this topic as it sort of increases in my everyday life and my experience. But the purpose of this roundtable specifically is to explore all of the ways in which Google Plus Hangouts can and will potentially transform the collaborations that are happening synchronously and asynchronously between teachers and leaders, within the school, within the district, and then sort of around the world. While this tool's only been around for a few years, it's kind of clear to me and hopefully the other folks on the panel and those that are watching that it's made a lot of inroads in both professional development and peer-to-peer learning. And this roundtable is really going to talk about a lot of the effective practices and dig into what makes this tool what I would say is an essential one for our schools and districts. Hopefully anybody who is watching is a teacher or leader that's currently interested or using Hangouts and wants to know more about how this is going to work. So I've introduced myself very briefly, but I'd like to hear from all of the panelists, and I'd love to hear, who you are, what you are up to currently, sort of in your work and life, and then also what makes Hangouts transformative. So what makes it a learning platform that is transformative, something that we couldn't do otherwise? And that's kind of important to me to think about, because it's not so much the idea that, we could do this using Skype, or we could do this, in a face-to-face event. Why is this different and truly important? Ryan, I'm going to throw it to you. Who are you? What are you doing? And why is this a transformative platform?
Well, my name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Professional Development Supervisor in Round Rock ISD, or it's a suburb of Austin down here in Texas. So I'm glad to be here, and we're using Google Plus and specifically Hangouts as kind of an add-on tool in our PD catalog with our teachers and students throughout the year. And think about how it's transformative is I've been happy with the way we've been able to add a Hangout feature when we're partnering with some of the different organizations that are putting MOOCs out there. I think it's helped our teachers that have signed up for certain of these online classes continue to collaborate and become a little more accountable to each other to actually finish the MOOC. So that's been the big add-on. Most people don't actually finish those classes, and by us using Hangouts, we've been able to help people along with that.
And so your idea then is, how do we make it about partnerships and bringing experts in, or partnering with other folks that are really sort of helping your own staff and your own teachers to expand their practice?
Exactly. I see it as kind of an add-on to all the great things. We're not recreating anything, but we're using this to make everything else a little better.
Nice. All right, Andrew, I'm going to throw it over to you. Who are you? What are you doing? And what are your thoughts around the transformative nature of Hangouts?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for having us on, Ben. I work in New York City. I'm part of a district within the larger district of the New York City Public Schools called New Visions for Public Schools. We have 75 high schools that are part of the district and another 6 high schools that are charters. All of our schools have fairly recently made the transition to Google Apps. So I have a team of 4 that's been supporting that. And we're in about 34 of the schools have student accounts at this point. So we've been sort of faced with a very small team supporting a really distributed rollout of Google Apps. So a lot of our initial use of Hangouts was with our technical liaisons at the schools. We actually empower all of our schools to manage their own Google Apps domains, if you can imagine that. So after our summer,
I'm really trying hard to imagine that right now.
Well, it's it turns out to be not that difficult to do. We had some pretty intensive summer training around domain admin best practices, and then a lot of our follow-up supports, believe it or not, were exclusively through Hangouts. So we have a lot of calendar appointments at this point are understood to have video links in them, and we pretty much at our first site visit at each of these schools, we bring a pair of headphones in a box with a little ribbon on it, and so it's sort of like a way of kicking off the relationship. And then we sort of basically say, look, this is probably going to be my last site visit. You can expect from here on out that we're going to be doing screencasts and screen shares with you. So I'd say
I tell that story to everyone. Like this idea of like, this is my gift to you. This is how we are going to collaborate. Like, to me, that is that alone is transformative in nature. Saying, I'm not going to come to your building 12 times this year, but I'm going to appear through your computer more than 30. Like those kinds of things are, I think, pretty different than what we could previously do, and I think your idea of making it into a gift is kind of powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we've extended it now over into our leadership and instructional coaching units as well. So we have increasingly cross-school teams of teachers that are starting to try this, and so I think we're a little further behind in that. I think what it most naturally lends itself to is getting shared screen time with somebody. What we find in our schools is, in addition to travel time, because we're flung across 5 boroughs in New York City, some of our schools are an hour and a half away by train. So you've got folks at the district level earning $100 an hour, sitting on trains for an hour and a half each way to then show up in someone's office, and then
great use of resources, maybe.
No, and then it takes another 20 minutes to get on the Wi-Fi because each school has its own secure Wi-Fi setting. So if you really just need to get on a document with somebody and talk about the document or talk about the admin panel, I find it's a much more efficient way to just cut to the chase and have that kind of shared screen. And I feel like that's actually awkward to do in person. Kind of like, all right, come sit next to me so we can both look at my computer, right? So there's just I find it just lends itself really naturally to anything that involves that shared screen, which is I think a ton of things in our new world.
So I think that idea of thinking about shared space, like where are our shared spaces, and the idea that this might be a third shared space, or maybe even fourth or fifth, but the idea being that like this is the place where we can come together, I think that can be pretty powerful. Before we go to the next person to introduce, I do want to make sure that everybody is in our collaborative notes, bit.ly/Hangout Roundtable. And if you go there, down at the bottom is the notes area, and you can take notes on all the brilliant things that we're talking about, and or make fun of us while we are talking. Either way, it's fine. Sheila, I'm actually going to unmute you guys because I'm or I think you need to do that, but if you can, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the ways in which you're thinking about Hangouts, even at this early stage.
Oh, do I have to? Okay. Sorry.
Sure.
Actually, we are just a small school district of about 4,400 kids in northern Colorado by Fort Collins. Windsor, Colorado is our little town. And I have 13 teachers with me today that are here to learn about Google. We have just gotten onto the Google Apps for Education about 2 years ago, and it's just really taking hold right now. Teachers are finding how wonderful it is for collaboration and just making their classrooms paperless. We're actually just purchased 480 Chromebooks that we're using for testing, but we're calling it the silver lining because we feel like it's we had to buy them for assessments, but teachers are getting them in the students' hands, and so we're very excited about that. The Hangouts part, we're really looking at how we can transform our professional development, and just like what Andrew was talking about, how the one-on-one and the screen shares and how we can do that. We're looking at doing Chromebook check-ins with the teachers that do have the new Chromebooks in their classrooms, like on a weekly basis through a Hangout rather than having to meet. Actually, the room we're meeting in right now is one of the largest rooms we have to meet in, and really it maxes out at about 20. And so we
We
having
currently have more viewers than that on this Hangout.
Exactly. So that's the benefit of it, I think. We've talked already this morning in our class about how maybe all the second grade classrooms across the district can get together and talk about their science units and, just things that are very grassroots.
So I think a couple of things right there are really important to call out. One is this idea of sort of Jobalike professional development. How do you get people together that are far-flung across the district, or like in Andrew's case, like across many, many districts, or different subsets? How do you get those people together to talk about something that they are passionate about, to talk about their classrooms, talk about their practice? How do you make that happen? And I think the other two things are the idea of checking in, and that we don't have to make it an event. It could just be like, okay, I'm just going to check in, see how things are going. This is something that we can, share, right? This is the shared space that we have. Then you talked about professional development, and I'm interested to hear maybe a couple more people, and I'm going to come to John. What are your thoughts around, how professional development has shifted based upon Hangouts? And I think obviously you should introduce yourself and say where you are, but those things, they're pretty minor.
Okay, yeah, those are minor. And yes, I think that we've been using our Google Hangouts. I'm John Samuelson. I'm currently actually unemployed right now, if truth be told. I was working for an ed tech startup and trying to help them with, just kind of find their way and give them a teacher perspective. But I really think that Google Hangouts for me have opened up a lot of opportunities just in the fact that we've done our podcasts from Google Hangouts. It's a free way that allowed me to do my podcast, and I think it's really interesting. I think that the other thing that, and I won't go too much into that, but I think that Google Hangouts have a great possibility if people can start to get on them and use them for, like Andrew said, saving time with commutes or just having those quick check-ins. And I really think that when we even talk about ed camps and the two ed camps that have been Ed Camp Online and Ed Camp Home, if we just set up a designated time where teachers could come in and, hey, if they have 12 o'clock on a Saturday open and they just want to come in and chat with some other teachers from around the country and it's a smaller conversation, I think that it could really take the place of where kind of like EdChat and some of those things have gotten on Twitter have gotten very, they can be very quick and go real fast for some people. I think that you can only have about 10 or 11 people on a Google Hangout, so you can really have some rich conversations, and you could take maybe that Twitter Ed chat or whatever social studies chat or whatever it is, third grade chat, and take it and have a designated Google Hangout time. And even if you had more than enough teachers, each one could go in, and I'm really interested to see how they organize that, because I think that now instead of traveling to ed camps and worrying about getting the venue and getting all this stuff together, I really think you could just cut all that out, take an hour and a half, and just meet with 10 teachers once a week or once a month. And I think that would really help professional development and help teachers take over what they want and have discussions about what they wanted to, and be able to be really honest about it too.
Well,
I really think that.
A number of things that you're talking about there are really important. One is that idea that you're actually forming a connection with a smaller group of people. I think one of the reasons why we think about Twitter as like this crazy place with, hundreds of thousands of teachers out there is that it seems too big. Right? And this is a way of making the world small, but also inclusive of those people that we would like to have within our community. And so by doing that, we don't have to talk to the masses. We can talk to one other person or 10 other people. And that ability is actually fairly profound to say, this is the group that I'm choosing to collaborate with. And I think that's pretty important. And I also think the networks that you are creating are going to be a lot deeper in that way. And I think, John, your podcast is creating its own sort of network of people around it that watch it, but then also come on and participate. They're a part of this. The second thing that I think is important is that ongoing structure that you're talking about. So it's not one time, right? It's not that one ed camp. It is an ongoing structure that you can put into place. Ian, I'm really interested in, you put in the chat here, something about serendipity and the openness of Hangouts. what are you thinking about in terms of that, and obviously introduce yourself and what have you?
Hey everybody, thanks Ben for having us in. My name is Ian OBrien. I'm an assistant professor here at University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut. I use Hangouts a couple different ways with different communities. First of all, I teach in our education program, so I work with pre-service teachers. I would have them, my first year teaching Ed Psych, I had teachers tell me that, some of my students told me that, teachers don't collaborate. And to that end, I basically said, well, you're all collaborating now, because now you have, group pieces that you have to present together. And it was the first year that we really got Hangouts. And so I basically would tell my students, it's asinine that you're driving an hour or more to get in to go meet with each other, stare at each other, and not get anything done, waste gas, complain to me, all that stuff, when you can pull this thing out, you can pull out a tablet, you can just hop on a Hangout in your PJs and chat about what you need to. You use Google Docs. So your excuses are out the window, and it's free. So we started folding that in.
Well, and I think your point about, and you are collaborating now, I actually think it's really important to, whenever you're on a Hangout or in a Google Doc, and you just take a moment, pause, and say, and this is what collaboration looks like.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like today, right?
We're all online. We're meeting together openly. We're taking our own time. We're the Google Doc right now, it's blowing up with people typing and annotating and having this documented, scaffolded learning over time. So we're all connecting this way. I also coordinate a program where here at the university where we take teachers and make them experts in the use of technology. And I don't use Blackboard at all. I don't use any of that drama. I use all Google apps. I use Google as my LMS. We use Google Hangouts, and I tell my students, they say, well, I'm a little bit nervous. I might not know how to use Storify or whatever, and I say, here's my Hangout. Here I am on Hangouts. I'm always online. You got a question about how to use Storify? I can video conference in at any point. If I don't answer, then I'm driving, or give me 2 minutes to drag my 3-year-old.
That's not a detriment for me. I answer all the time when I'm driving. So.
Hey, I did a video conference. We're writing a chapter on open learning, and I had the camera muted out so people couldn't see anything. And then finally, most of the people left, and a couple of my colleagues remained. And I turned on the camera, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm at a rest stop right now." And they're like, "Why? Did you stop for the call?" I'm like, "No, I just stopped just this second." So. The last part is my own personal learning. I documented on my blog, but that's the serendipity part. Where else would we have this opportunity to just dip in on a conversation, learn something, meet and connect with another community of learners? Back when I was teaching 8th grade or high school, in all of our buildings, there's people that have different interests, and so back in the day, I might have been, I was that geeky teacher that was having my kids make Edgar Allan Poe videos, and now I can hop online and dive in and sit with a bunch of people that are experts and do digital storytelling, or I can hop on and sit with you guys for an hour and talk about Hangouts, or I can sit with the pedagogy group or whoever. You have an interest, get online. Access is an issue, but if you got an interest, get out there. You have the opportunity to jump in, and there's that serendipitous moment where you can learn and express and explore anything, and that's what PD really is all about, or it should be about.
Well, so I'm interested in this idea of interest-based PD, of thinking about, whether it's, what you're passionate about, or you have a specific goal that you're really trying to attain throughout the year. You've set a goal at the beginning of the year, I am going to learn about X, or I'm going to become better at teaching, reading strategies. Then by saying that out loud and sort of saying that to other people, then you can start that work of the conversation and sort of that important part of it. So Craig, I'd love to hear, where are you in the world? What are you working on? And, what are you thinking about this transformative nature of Hangouts?
Okay. I made a couple of notes as people have been talking. I'm the Director of Technology at Minot Public Schools in North Dakota. And we've got 18 schools. We've got one high school basically and 2 campuses, so we don't deal with what New York does. But one of the things, and again, I'm a Google certified teacher, and we've been really trying to promote it. We've got our own Google Apps for Education domain. But everybody has traffic problems. We've got a couple of schools that are on an Air Force base 13 miles north of town, and when we get down to our Common Core discussions and we get down to our PLCs, instead of teachers having to drive through town and try to get together at one spot, we're really encouraging them to use Google Hangouts and be able to use it just for that purpose. Collaborate on the documents that they're doing, their common assessments, whatever it might be. And like Ian was talking about the graduate class, I teach a graduate class for our local university, and some of my students this last semester were in Montana and a city that was about an hour and a half drive from here. So I was getting them connected in using Google Hangouts. So, and then at the same time, I was recording everything that I was doing during that class, and it wasn't really a podcast, but it was really a screencast, so they could go back, and if they missed it, they had that to look at, and they could go back and review if they wanted to see how to do something that I'd shown them. And it was a technology-based class, so it was all about the tools and about Google, and we actually used Google as our source of exchanging all the information. It was totally paperless class, that type of thing. As far as transformation, when you talk about how does it compare to Skype, well, Skype is basically point-to-point, as most of those other tools are. And here we can have 10 people online and again, bring people from different schools, different purposes, plus recording it and having unlimited viewers that could be watching it live or after the recording.
So I think the recording portion of that is actually pretty important. The idea that we are saying this is something that happened at this particular time. We are taking part in this Hangout, but there are a lot of viewers that are taking part in this Hangout, but it actually doesn't have to stop there, right? Like the conversation can keep on going, and we can actually take that learning object and chop it up, right? Like you might have had the most brilliant 5 minutes within your session, and rather than just saying, you know what, start at this point and end at this point in your video, you could actually just download the video, cut that 5-minute clip, and say, this is the thing that everybody needs to focus on. Like, I think about this as and I guess I'll introduce myself. So I'm in Denver Public Schools, and one of the things that I ran into is that we do a lot of webinars. Like, webinars are the thing that we do when we want people to know information. And it's about dissemination. It's kind of what you were talking about a little bit, Craig, that point-to-point, or, but the idea being that, well, maybe we don't need to do webinars. Maybe we need to have more conversations. Maybe we need to ask and answer more questions. And so by having a panel of people talking about an important point, we actually dig a lot deeper than we would if we would just, well, this is my PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk through it. Probably read from it a number of times. And one of the things that we found powerful about that too is, so let's say that we have an hour, but then if we just chop it down into questions and answers, we have this video-based frequently asked questions that becomes kind of powerful. And I actually want to start, and it looks like Nancy and Michelle are actually not able to join on the video. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but they're just going to listen in. So I want to actually talk about some best practices. So if you join us in the collaborative notes, bit.ly/Hangout Roundtable, and then looking at it from Merrick's question, who is a fellow Google Teacher Academy Chicago participant, as well as myself and Andrew Stillman. And Ian, were you in that cohort?
No, I wanted to be. They wouldn't let me in.
Oh, all right. Well, no, so anyway, I'm trying to make sure. But he was in this with us, and he has a question around, do you have any guides or tips on how to best facilitate Hangouts? How should we be doing this? How do we make it the most transformative experience for our own schools districts? And I'm going to just open that up if anybody has thoughts. And if you don't, then I'll start calling on you.
I mean, I can say something if no one else. I don't like to butt in too much, but the way that we like to use our Hangouts, and I think that one of the ways, like right now I have the video on, but I like to get my Google Doc, and one of the ways that we've been meeting on some of the projects that I've been doing is we'll get a Google Hangout going, we'll have our Google Doc going, and then I open the Google Drive app, and so then the Google Doc is just flat out open right in front of you instead of the video, and then everybody's down at the bottom, and then we can sit there and we can type in and talk and kind of look at each other, but we can go ahead and type and talk and create the document right then and there, and this is for just a couple of the new projects that I've been gotten going. But I think that it's awesome to be able to sit there, and instead of just having like a phone call where I put it on speakerphone, we can all just Google Hangout because we're pretty adept at it, and you can see what people are thinking, and we can create docs or spreadsheets right in there for the planning out of what we're doing. And that's the way I really like to use it. Just adding the app in for the Google Drive makes it so powerful for me, because really I know what I look like. I'm not pretty. I don't want to see my big face on the computer. I'd rather see the doc, you know?
So to me, that's actually really important, is saying, like, this is how we're connecting, right? Like, this is the protocol in which you can hear my voice and see me, but actually our work is done elsewhere. And so you're adding the Google Drive app, and then, you know, one of my favorite features of the Hangout is, oh, I forgot to make a shared notes document. So I go into the Drive app and it says create shared notes, and then there they are. And so, you know, even if I didn't plan ahead of time, I can hit that button and you know, not even have to worry about it. Andrew, I'm interested in your thoughts on that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think our biggest challenge is that recognizing that this is a pretty big shift of behavior, unless you're part of the early adopter set. So I think you know, there's
shift in behavior. How?
Well, I think there's discomfort in asking someone with whom you normally have an in-person relationship to kind of do this instead. And I think I'm thinking most specifically about our coaches. And I don't know if other districts have people in this role, but anyone who's kind of a career coach that's not used to using this format for their coaching, they themselves require a fair amount of support to kind of get over their discomfort. So I'm just thinking about there a number of things that are kind of glitchy about the process that, you know, if you're not, for example, super savvy with audio settings, right? Like there's all this classic futziness around getting the right mic, and in particular, if you don't spend the money on headphones, most schools are not quiet settings, right? So you have this
with good reason,
right? But so what we found is that you know, if you're not really careful and you don't get headsets out to all your people, the audio can be really horrendous, right? So I think being really mindful of what some of the technical barriers are, and then helping people through that is really essential. We also struggle because Google Plus ultimately is a social network, and I don't necessarily find that every teacher wants a Google Plus profile. So there's this additional layer of getting folks to set up their Google Plus profiles. I'm curious about how people deal with that. You know, we prefer not to be using teachers' personal Gmail accounts. We'd rather be using their domain accounts. But it obviously is up to the user whether they want to enable Google+. I'm curious if other folks have gotten resistance around that, or how do you introduce that to people? Because it still seems like a you know, one of these requirements that it's like, I need you to join Facebook so that you can talk to me, right? You're kind of making this interesting ask of someone who in a normal professional setting might not be expecting that.
Right, and I think that's actually important. Like, there is some baggage here, perhaps. In order to be able to have Hangouts, we do have to have Google+. To me, it's like, well, that's what you would take with you on the trip. Like, this is baggage that we want. Like, we absolutely want. And so, to me, a number of the ways that we're sort of bridging the gap is by making communities the central component of Google Plus, and making, like, okay, so not only are you joining the ability to have Hangouts, but I'm joining the second grade teachers of DPS. community. I'm joining the new teacher and leader mentors. Like, this is how you're going to get access to that. So as long as I don't separate the two, like if I say communities and Hangouts, those are the things we want, like then it becomes a little bit easier to make that case. But I think you're right, that if you're saying you don't really need this profile thingy, it's just so you can have this video component. I also think that the component of being on screen is not something we have traditionally done, right? Like being in your own, like on your face everywhere all of the time is not something teachers are traditionally sort of excited about. Very often I will be in PD and they will say, no pictures, please. And this is like that one step removed even from that. So, so Ryan, I'm interested in, you brought up PD in your PJs, and I'm interested in, how you guys have attempted to lower the barrier, let's say, to accomplishing this, right?
Sure. Yeah, we do PD in your PJs once a month. It's at night from 7 to 8 p.m. and it's led by our technology department. And they basically have a different topic each month. And just some of the best practices we've learned is how important it is to have like a moderator. So we'll have, and I put a link to tonight's actually in the chat. We'll add that to the notes page as well. But we'll have 4 or 5 people who have planned out kind of talking points and presentation about a certain topic. Then there'll be a host. It's kind of throwing it back and forth from one person to another. And we usually have about 40 to 50 Round Rock teachers that log on at night and complete the. There's an assessment that goes along with it because we give them actual PD credit for turning it in. So that makes it a little more relevant and important to people when you add. It's only an hour of credit, but that gives it some backing to it. It's been very popular. We have Google Plus. We've had Google Plus for probably 2 years now. So like what you were saying, Ben, really the communities aspect is where we really push it and get the buy-in. We have a lot of the same community.
Question for you.
Sure.
All we can do is offer graduate credit, so we're bound by the local university's requirements of what we can teach. We can't really teach skill-based. How do you handle your PD credits then, and how are the teachers encouraged? What's their reward for taking things?
Well, teachers in Texas anyway have to have 150 every 5 years. We call them continuing professional education credits. And basically, as a school district, we sponsor certain events, and we give credit for what we value. So we have a little more flexibility, it sounds like, than you guys might in North Dakota. But that's how we're able to, me as the professional development supervisor, I can watch it, I can see the quality of it, the value in it, so we give credit for that opportunity.
So you could be teaching something just on how to use Google Slides, for example.
Oh, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can't do that for ours. We have to tie it directly into a curriculum, somehow into what they're using it for, the collaboration part of it or whatever.
Yeah, and our teachers do that. Our adult teachers that are our PD presenters. Everything's definitely tied back to, we call them the TEKS. But the fact that it doesn't have to be strictly a TEKS-based training for them to get credit.
Mm. Well, and I think it's important to think about how it fits within your system. Like it can't look the exact same as it looks within Ryan's system as it does, in Minot. And to me, that's pretty important. And I just invited Annabelle to join in here. She had a really interesting idea so they did a series of Hello Hangouts, which to me is really intriguing. So I wanted to get her story in here. Annabelle, what did you guys do to help sort of ease the transition?
Well, I'm operating from outside of the school. I'm a non-profit. So I wasn't assuming anything, and I didn't know about, I had, over 300 students in 6 different countries. So I had no idea how anyone was set up. So I just approached it like a human would.
Like a human would. That's
weird. A novel concept.
I just figured I should be saying hello to these good people, and just keeping it as a hello, make it low key and low risk, and I did a hello hangout with the teachers individually at their convenience to begin with, so that they didn't have to be embarrassed in front of their students. And I said it need only be a 10-minute hello. It's, you know, it's just as if we were meeting in the hallway and saying hello. They liked that, and they tended to want more then. And then I said, let's do a hello hangout with your kids. And so there wasn't any kind of really formal agenda to the first couple of meetings, and so people weren't uptight about, oh, what if I don't get it, you know, what if I'm not ready by 2 o'clock, what if I'm 5 minutes late? Doesn't matter, we're just going to say hello. So I just lowered the expectation, lowered the risk factor, and that seemed to make a nice, comfortable beginning and set a good tone, and yeah, it seemed to work well. And I just think the phrase "hello hangout" was friendly. I wanted to bring parents in as well, but it didn't.
You said a couple of things that are actually really important to me. One is this idea of finding each other in the hallway, right? Like you were saying, it can be that simple. Like, this is the network of our hallways. We're just making our hallways much bigger, right? And the ability to run into people sort of down the hallway, you know, is sort of expansive now. And I like the idea that you're engaging people one-on-one first, lowering the barrier to entry, making it as easy as possible. So both of those things are important. I do have two questions. One is, where are you from? Where are you calling from today?
I'm in Connecticut, but I might sound like I'm in England.
Okay. There is a little bit of that. So Connecticut, we have a couple people from New England, which I like a lot. And then, is that a Google Classroom's coffee cup behind you?
It's somewhere, is it? Yes, yes, and a T-shirt somewhere as well. I'm a fangirl. You know, let's just put that out there.
And so I didn't know if you had this special access to Google Classrooms that you might be able to regale us with while we're here.
Well, they were very attentive and sweet and supportive. They noticed that I was probably one of the first people doing performing arts in the K-12 space on Google. I started that over a year ago with a Spanish classic play, Life is a Dream. And so I was invited down to the hallowed halls of Google in New York City, and what a fun day that was. And they chatted and, you know, just made me feel, you know, just encouraged me, really. So, and then I got the T-shirt to prove it.
Well, that's good. So I like that. So not only are we valuing and honoring people by, you know, coming to them and meeting them where they are, but hopefully valuing and honoring time by sort of showing appreciation. So I really appreciate you, you know, hopping on this very short notice. Let's tackle a couple of the questions that got raised up in the chat here. How do you stave off Hangout overkill? So, as you might know, I invite people to a Hangout every 2 weeks, and I invite thousands of people to do this. You know, some of which take me up on the offer, and others, you know, do not, and say, "Please don't ever do this again." That doesn't actually happen very often. But how do you sort of stave off Hangout overkill? Like, should everything be on Hangouts, or should we really reserve it for certain things? And I'm going to just open that up, so anybody who has thoughts.
I think that's one of those challenges, is that, you know, I'm a believer in open. I think everything should be open and online. The challenge is that, you know, it's Tina Fey basically called it digital graffiti. Then you just have just a bunch of garbage online. My colleague Annabelle would basically ask the question of, like, well, why are you putting this up there? You know, before anything, like, why? Is there value of this for other people to see? But I recognize the fact that there's a lot of times that I'm in just a regular Hangout. It's not broadcast online, and it's not on my YouTube channel. And so I'll talk with colleagues or friends, or we'll talk through a paper, and at the end I'm like, I really wish I had a copy of that, you know, or there are people that weren't there. So I'm basically running a Hangout, and it's private, so nobody has any fears about other people listening or lurking or whatever, but I'm running Screencast-O-Matic so I can have a copy of it. So I'm basically, and those of us that use Chromebooks, you know, most of us are using Hangouts on air to screencast and then private, you know, make it private later. So I would rather have everything open, but the thing to keep in mind is that I'm not.
So I think there's.
Did he freeze?
I don't know.
I froze him with that last one.
I'll take advantage of his paralysis.
Andrew, what do you think? Is that normal? Is this normal behavior?
I mean, I'm thinking more about the nature of the relationships that you're trying to form, and where you are in your relationships with people. You know, I operate in a district that has a fair amount of fear and loathing kind of baked into the culture.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I'm at the district level, so one has to be kind of ever mindful of building those bonds of trust. Mm-hmm. And so I'm reluctant to say that I would want to start my relationship with somebody via Hangout in a school that I have to kind of try to build capacity in over time. I'd want to really do a hybrid approach and front load with some really high power in-person kinds of experiences, and then use the Hangout as a sustaining mechanism. Because I think you know, to some it can feel like this you know, relationship on the cheap, I guess. Like I'd want to be careful about that.
Well, that was one of my questions before. Is, you know, I work with teachers. I try to make them experts in the use of tech. I work in schools for PD, and in academia, there's a huge question about: is it okay to be open? Is it appropriate for me to be on this Hangout right now talking about stuff when I should be grading papers or whatever? But, you know, does the school system want their teachers online? You know, is there a way to protect them? Those of you that work in the school systems, do you have that sort of dialogue? Is there that tension?
I mean, I find there's a huge spectrum, and certainly there are folks that are really averse to Google's privacy practices, or as they perceive them, and so I mean we've definitely had some folks that, you know, threaten union grievances because we even set up a Google Apps account for them. And that's obviously one extreme, and you know, there's obviously a huge other extreme, but I do think it's an interesting time because I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about one's digital footprint, and it's not wrong for folks to be questioning that. So, you know, for me to just sort of ask them to set up a Google Plus profile without giving them any guidance on how to do so with the appropriate privacy settings doesn't feel right either, right? I don't want to rush people into something. So, so I think holding people's hands and being really clear about the control that they have in the process is really important. Showing them where all the settings are, showing them how to do the minimal, like, Google Plus profile that exposes literally nothing about them, and say, look, you can do this if you want. It's up to you.
And I think the question also becomes, what do we recommend, but also, you know, what do we encourage? Like, there are some things that we might say, we actually do want this to be more open. We want to encourage our users to start sharing more openly and what their classrooms might look like. So to me, this is a really important question. I'm going to be engaged in a project this coming school year where we're going to give webcams and microphones to 200 teachers and saying, this is the collaborative map of our entire district. Go and meet up with other people using Hangouts and record your classrooms and share them here, you know. And so I'm going to be asking people to be more open, and so I'm struggling with this really a whole bunch and thinking about it. I'd like to switch gears maybe a little bit and talk about another side of Hangouts, right? So Dave says, I recently learned that Portage Public School teachers in Michigan have been using Google Hangouts to connect classes with their local zoo, learning about animals in the winter without having to go through all of the hoops of doing a field trip. The idea of getting outside of the four walls of your classroom or outside of the school and getting into another organization, we talked a little bit about partnerships. What do you see the role of Hangouts being in helping to break down the walls of the school and the classroom. Not necessarily in an open way, could be private between two parties, but what do you see the role being? And Craig, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think about this idea?
Well, I guess we've done some things like that to bring in that expert. You can't have every 5th grade classroom make a visit to the fire hall and get the fire chief to talk to them, but you can do a Google Hangout and record it and have it live and let the students participate and ask questions with it that way. Or bring in that expert when you're studying about New Zealand or Australia and have some connections with educators there. So yeah, expanding beyond that classroom is huge. Just going back to that last question about, you know, overkill, there's still, you know, that big advantage of Twitter chats where you can have 80 people within an hour just, you know, sharing ideas and a lot of information, which you really can't do in a Google Hangout. We're kind of limited to the 10 people here. You can record it and you can set up a community so you can continue that conversation. It's just how you kind of set it up and manage it. And I'm kind of wondering if anybody is using the Google Hangouts within their domain, because we've chosen not to do so at this point because it's outside the walled garden.
It's a really important question, and there are a number of Colorado districts that have struggled with this as well. We are currently using it within our domain, absolutely. Plus, you get up to 15 people instead of 10 if you're inside of a domain, which is super nice. And we see a lot of benefit. You can actually do a walled garden where inside of your domain it says who is inside and outside of your domain within Hangouts. Like, it gives you a little symbol in the corner, and you can sort of restrict where Hangouts are done. And so there are a lot of settings that Google is stepping up on. John, I saw you come back, so did you have something to say on that?
No, I came back in. I'm sorry. I had a very important phone call. See, this is what happens when you're unemployed. You have to take the phone calls about jobs that come up. So that's what had happened. So I completely apologize. No, I didn't get one. We're trying to talk it over. It's don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Don't worry. I'll find a job. If not, I'll be looking for one in August. No, I mean, I know that in our school, our old school district, we used to use the domain, and once you get, this kind of goes with what Andrew was talking about. I think is once you get through the initial pain of getting someone to the Google Hangout or getting their notifications done, I mean, really after that, it's pretty much a snap. So that it really is my go-to way to communicate with people if I know that they're on Google, they're in my Google Plus circles, and we can get them going. We had a superintendent of school districts on Techlandia, and she had such a hard time getting through, and she had her tech people there or whatever. But I told her that once she gets through the pain, that she would be there. And so it was so funny to see, like, she's in this big superintendent chair, and you've got two guys in suits, like, looking around her. And then I'm just like, the whole thing for me was, I looked at him and I said, "You guys are on Internet Explorer. Go to Google. Go to Google Chrome." And then right away it went and it worked. So I think that one of the things that people always have to realize, one of the simple things, is get off the Internet Explorer, put the Internet Explorer down, and pick up the Google Chrome or whatever else of a modern browser you have to use, because that solves a lot of the problems. And I think that the world is open with Google Hangouts. Once you get it going, you don't have to commute. You can go green and save trees and save gas and all sorts of things.
So I'm actually intrigued by this idea of the pain that is required to like persevere to get to the point of collaboration, like, and how often do we stop just before that point of collaboration, just before the point where we actually get to the good stuff? As teachers, you know, in PD, you know, a lot of times we see, like, okay, so this isn't going well, we should stop, versus we should persevere and you know, keep going and really try and strive for some of the most important pieces here. So we have about 10 more minutes, and I'd like everybody to kind of think about the challenge that lays before us. we have, we're all connected within a community here. You're now all in a persistent Hangout that I will rename right after we're done here, so that if you want to send a chat message to anybody that's here, you can say, okay, I'm gonna, I want to ask you a question, or I want to think through something with you. You're all connected to one another. And the challenge that I present to you guys is, how do we make this something that becomes a default sort of collaboration place? How do we make something that it isn't painful for people to take part in? And I think as an offshoot of that question from Zach is, what are the things that we can do to help sort of lower the barrier entry for rural communities, for folks who don't have access to computers that can run, or that have a webcam and a microphone and things like that? How do you allow for sort of that variety and not just make it for the people that have and who know? How do you make it less painful? And what are the basic infrastructure for those things that you need to put in place? And I'll turn that out to anybody. I'm interested to hear, Ryan, what you guys have done.
Well, I think right now we're looking at really ways to get access and devices into the hands of some of our lower economic students. And that's kind of the next step we're taking is in a certain portion of our community, there's a huge divide. I'm sure most school districts, especially school districts our size, are dealing with the same kind of issue. So I think that's the first kind of step is getting the internet access. We're working with different grants and community groups to provide that. We're going to have like a big kickoff for parents going to be able to come and get a $10 modem, take it home, set them all up, and like that. So I think that's really where we are when it comes to access for basically our students. We're lucky enough that our teachers are very well equipped from the district, as well as just kind of the area that we live in is pretty tech savvy. So we're lucky in that regard.
All right. So how else do we make this less painful to collaborate?
I mean, I would say that.
Go for it. Go for it.
There's two sides to that. One is it's got to be rewarding enough that the pain is worth it. So I think
I don't want it to be like a birthing process, though. Like, right? Like, this is the worst agony ever, and then the baby. Like this. It shouldn't be that bad.
I guess one way that right now we're making it easier is that, so I'm putting on a 8-day 300-session conference this summer, and there's some teachers that are going to be teaching classes, but they don't have many people signed up yet, so I might have to cut their class. So I went to them, we did a quick, I taught them how to use Hangouts, we did a Hangout on air for them to pitch their class. So I did like a 2-minute quick interview with them. They made their script. I send that out to the rest of the school district. They're going to get people signed up for their class now. Their class they'll get paid that extra money this summer for teaching that class. So it was really had nothing to do with instruction, but it was like an entry point, for them to get in and learn about Hangouts, and they're going to go forward with it from there. So I think just finding, even if it's not really instruction related, if you find what that person wants, you give it to them, then they'll go with it.
I like that, though, that you're taking it to them and where they are, and lowering their barrier to entry. Andrew, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I think districts have a tremendous amount to gain, and district employees, folks that are having to serve multiple schools, can be your biggest advocates here. They're also some of the least likely to pick it up because it's not within their kind of career toolkit. But we have a couple of folks that are just they're in their mid-60s as professionals. One person I'm thinking of is a budget and procurement specialist. In the last 2 weeks, she's gotten to have 30 budget modeling conversations with 30 different schools. She is feeling more efficacious in her job than she ever has, and I listen to her across the cubicle farm, and she battles it out and says, "No, I'm gonna call you on the phone. Now I want you to plug the headset in. Now I want you to change the audio settings," and so it's a phone call. That then she forces the end of the phone call and she leads them onto the Hangout. And this is someone who is one of your least likely suspects, and she would not be doing this if the benefits were not so bleedingly obvious to her, right? Yeah. And the fact that she's able to get on a shared spreadsheet that lets that school do financial modeling of the upcoming year and make hiring decisions. Incredibly powerful, and nobody is doubting when they got off that call that it was worth the trouble. So I think that's what I mean by make the Hangouts really worth it, because there are certain parts of the job that Hangouts are so superior for, right? And again, I think it's around student data as well. Districts have access to tremendous amounts of student-level data, and we talk a good game around data-driven decision-making, for example, both at the school and classroom level. But what does that mean? Often that's a charade. It's not what we really do. And so we're increasingly looking at ways of staging that data prior to the Hangouts and having a set of inquiry questions that we've come up with around a particular time of the year. Like, we've got to be scheduling kids for next semester. Let's go down into the student level data and let's get the data specialist, the leadership coach, and the principal on a Hangout for an hour and have a structured conversation around that student data. You couldn't do that in an office, right? You would get sidetracked. People would be rifling through binders trying to find all the right stuff, right? So I think there are certain ways in which you can make it so powerful that nobody wants to do it any other way.
Well, and I think your point here of making it worth it, make the Hangout worth it. Like, I think that goes along for any professional development or conversation, like
Sure.
anything. Like, make it worth it. And I've always sort of gone under the guise of, people will change if you give them a reason to do so. And if you give that reason and it's compelling enough and it is sort of important enough to their work and what they want to do with students and with teachers, then I think that they will, and that it becomes this valuable tool. So we're right around trying to wrap up here, and I'm really excited about. John, you can't say goodbye. What's the final word?
Okay, so I just wanted to say really quickly that there's a great educator in Nebraska named Brent Catlett, and he's at Catlett1 on Twitter, and he has a site that I did tweet to the hashtag called EduHangouts, where it allows teachers to go ahead and if they want to learn more, they can go ahead and connect with those people, and it does it's one of his Google projects, I think, but he's trying to get people and build the community. So if you're interested, I did tweet that link. Brent Catlett has tried to connect and try and get people to meet pretty regularly with a site called EduHangouts.
Nice. I'm going to take that as your last word. Is that cool? All right. I want everybody else to actually say that, what is the one thing that you would encourage people to do? Just like John was talking about, what's the one thing you would encourage people to do to help transform their practice through the use of Hangouts? And Annabelle, I want to come to you next.
Well, I was just going to say, I do believe that it's about benefits, and I think that if you can communicate to the teachers just the benefits, not the how-to, and then if the teachers were to pass that on along and repeat it and say to their own kids, if we learn this technology, we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z, for example. Bring parents in for in-classroom performances, whatever. I always think about the arts. But if you sell the benefits then to the kids, and then you turn around and you're transparent to the kids and you say, but I'm not an expert. I don't know how to do this. And I'm asking you kids to help me learn how Google Hangouts and make it a very, let's walk the walk. Let's push through this persistence together with the kids instead of trying to walk in there as the authority that knows everything and then gets really agitated when something goes wrong. That's not the way to be a teacher anymore. So I would just really, really open the doors and windows wide and let some fresh air into this process.
Nice. Greg, what would you challenge everybody to do?
I guess I'm kind of struggling with the question a little bit, but here we have a lot of technology integrationists in every building. So whenever we get a teacher that's interested, they've got that support right in their building to go ahead and get a Google Hangout going with another school district, with another teacher. We have them going classroom to classroom within our own district with projects and things. So yeah, it's just them seeing the benefits of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think just getting it on the calendar, like we are going to do this tomorrow or next week or things like that, right?
Right.
Ian, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that my usual thought pattern in this is that we need to consider the norms, the normal people. Most of us here, we're all drinking the Kool-Aid. We love doing this. We'll dive in at any point on a Hangout. But for the most part, we're not normal. We're not normal people. The normal people do have concerns about this. They do have bigger questions about, we're in between two models here. They have questions about public versus private identity. They have, 5 years ago, if you had a Facebook account, and some places still, you'd lose your job. So what does this mean with that? So there's a lot of concerns. So we need to, as been stated here, have those initial face-to-face meetings. Have it be value added. Be very clear and explicit in what the value is, and make it approachable. Don't worry, you're not going to break the internet. The dog is not going to eat the internet. Like, there's no way that you can break this system. Try it. You're going to break some eggs. Play a little bit. Make it approachable. But we need to consider the norms and how they get into this whole structure.
Nice. Ryan, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that, kind of when I work with people who are providing the training for our teachers, that I just want to make it a given that there's going to be some kind of out of the classroom, either follow-up or prior to that session interaction. Hangouts is one of them. Twitter would be another one. Could be an in-person meeting before or after. But I really just see Hangouts as a tool that we're going to use to provide that ongoing PD or upfront PD, and it just has to be a given. It's part of the process.
Yeah, and I think that really makes it pretty clear that we're not advocating, okay, Google Plus Hangouts above all else, but it is a strategy that we see very concrete benefits for, and this is why, right? And making that case. Mm-hmm. Andrew, any final words?
Yeah, just one final little tip that I use is I find a lot of folks are really comfortable keeping a calendar and responding to calendar invites. And so we've primarily put our Hangouts in as video links in calendar events, and it's just sort of a way of normalizing it. Yet another step. You're just saying, no, we've got a meeting on the calendar. Where is that meeting located? Hangout link within. Right. And I just put that on as the location for the events, and so you start to say, no, we have an appointment. If I have to, I'll call you on the phone to teach you how to get on, but we have an appointment. Mm-hmm. And it's just like any other appointment. So that's been big for us. It's also important for us because, unfortunately, in New York City, most of our schools have filters that they can't control, and Google Plus is blocked entirely. So that's the back door. If you're in a district that has blocked Google Plus, Hangouts still work as long as they're embedded in a calendar event.
Oh, very nicely done, sir.
There you go.
I like it. All right. Well, those are some really good ideas and thoughts, and I've kept everybody about 3 minutes over. I do want to make sure that we hit all these questions, but we're not going to necessarily answer them. It's just so that these get archived within the Hangout and not lost into forever time. So if you want to hop off, please do so. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really great.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
All right. So Jeff said the openness question seems to be more related to overall culture, more than just a Hangout issue. You get some of the same apprehension with OER. It might be another roundtable conversation, but we should explore how we encourage sharing in general. I don't know that I could agree any more. That's really, really important. For those of you who would like to create your own roundtables, you can do that. I set up a form that actually creates the Google Doc and sends it to you, as well as puts it onto a calendar event. Oh, well, Andrew Stillman's on the call, so I should just say that the scripts that are on that are from him. So it's bit.ly/create roundtable, and yes, please go do that because we would like to do more of these. Barbara put this in a couple of times. She's an admin, site-based admin. She wants her teachers to be involved in PD in whatever way works for them, and I would say that's amazing, and we should have many more admin that are like that. The question from Zach, do you point out the differences between apps for education privacy and general public privacy? I try and do that, and I know, Andrew, you do a lot of work around the privacy issues and have done a couple of pieces of writing on that. Any things that you would point people to if you're still interested in answering a question?
Well, my understanding is that Google Plus does not fall underneath the Apps for EDU agreement. That essentially, at present, if you enable Google Plus on your profile, you accept the regular terms of service for a personal, not for the core services, but for Google Plus.
Right.
And so, I don't believe that it would be considered like a legitimate FERPA contract, for example, if you're in the U.S. and you're interested in, making sure that student data, for example, is protected. I'm not sure if you're not recording the Hangout and you're doing a screen share. How should we interpret that, right? If the document is in Docs, it contains student data, but it's ephemerally passing through Hangout, which is not under the FERPA terms of service. So, you could drive yourself crazy with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We live in lots of gray areas right now. My view is Google's going to have to keep working on this stuff, and we need to help them understand why it's important. So and it's they've been responsive in the last year. We've seen some major changes. So I think Google Plus is probably next in that regard.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right, and they see the power of this thing. It'll be interesting when Classroom comes into it, because I do see that as another stream-based system that may or may not be sort of for the classroom, and if we can get Hangouts in there, then it may be somewhat less important. But we'll see what happens after I/O this year. Greg has this great question about what's a great pair of cheap headphones with microphone that you would recommend to give out to teachers. Andrew, I'm going to come to you again. What do you give them?
I don't remember. It was I think a Logitech, one of the lower end Logitech. It was they're like $15 a pair.
Yep, that's what I recommend too.
Yeah.
So anything more than that, and I just can't imagine. Logitechs tend to work with everything. So as long as it's a USB and somewhat not gonna break on you all of the time, then I think it's probably okay. But yeah, Merrick is saying that maybe it's Andrew's birthday today. Is that possible?
It's possible.
It's possible. Well, happy birthday. And John, at this point, if you would like to put a birthday hat on, you may, and you may use the sound effects.
Oh, okay, that's good. Did you notice how I kept the sound effects off the whole time?
I was just giving you a hard time. It would have been fine.
I had them there, but I didn't want to do that. That would be cheap. But yeah, thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it. We got to figure out a way to get the Google Hangouts. I think it's one of the solutions, and not everybody will be comfortable with it, but a lot of people will. And I think it's a good way. I think that a lot of ed camps could run just through Google Hangouts, or just little cohorts, like they do the coffee queue and the brew queues in California. You could do little meetups like this. Yeah, I know. Basically, it's what we did, right?
Yeah, what we set up is we've been doing an ed camp every summer. So we had our recent one. We had a little unconference here. Open it up. We had kids come in and teach. We had 5th graders come in and teach us how to code. We had all sorts of cool sessions. But then I said, well, here's the issue: is I've got friends globally that I like to bring in. And so what we did was we set up the regular ed camp, calendar up on a board here, and we had people populating that on Google Docs. We also had one room that was I created a Hangout on Air lane. So the HOA lane for the conference. So we basically said, okay, I grabbed a couple of my friends globally that came in, and they would present, on the Hangout on Air in the little room there. So I said, you can go to a different session, you can walk around, but in this one room, it's only a Hangout. So if you sit in, you're sitting in on a Hangout, and we're going to virtually bring in a presenter from Michigan State, Michigan State or wherever. They're going to talk about maker fairs and stuff. You have a Hangout on Air lane, and it worked. I'd like to integrate more. We also tried to roll in the, I don't know if you guys have played around with the Unhangouts from MIT. We tried to roll that in, but I didn't get it approved quickly enough. But that's more for like informal breakout sessions. But the Hangout on Airlane worked really well for us.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did that too at our ed camp in Denver, and it definitely works. I'm a huge fan of it, but I'm interested in what John was talking about doing it almost entirely online and having the different sessions sort of all be like this. Okay, somebody is asking for a mustache, so I have to do that. So it's important to me too to think about how we model and show the things that we are sort of aiming to do. So in this fall, I think during Connected Educator Month, I'm going to do a worldwide roundtable day. So each one of you will be hopefully leading a roundtable on something or other. But the idea being that we should model and show how connected we can all be. I'm going to power through these here. So, Andrew, does it have to be a Google Calendar, I presume, for the Hangout backdoor to schools without access to Google+? I think you just have to have the link, quite frankly. You could invite, like, an Outlook calendar to the event as long as the link is present within the description or within the location.
That's right. And often I'll just chat people the link to the Hangout or email it to them at the last minute. Yeah.
Yep. So the hashtag, lots of folks have been using that. It will obviously exist forever, so if you want to use Hangout Roundtable again, or if you'd like to do your own roundtables on this subject, please keep going. This is for Ian. Do you ever curate the conversations on Hangouts for later use? And my guess is yes, but I'm not really sure where he was going with that one.
Yeah, what I've been trying to do is, I think that, and this came up a couple times, like where we'd like to see this medium head is I'm trying to figure out the best way to grab those chats and make it more, track learning over time, like allow people to come back and revisit that. And so what we've talked about throughout this show is grabbing that chat, putting it in the Google Doc, but then also, not everybody can see, not everyone can hear. So is there a way we can get I frequently will download the audio MP3 of these so that people can listen to it at a later date, because I do a lot of listening to audio podcasts, but is there a way to, grab the transcription? Now I know YouTube will give you the transcription, but it's real challenging. So what I like to see is get high quality transcription from this with just the audio MP3, put that in one Google Doc, and then almost like, I like a lot of what Rap Genius has done in that model, but let people go in and sort of collaboratively annotate and sort of break down, what you're talking about in the episode. Hopefully it's thick, rich description, but, discussion, but.
Yeah, no, I could see that a couple of different ways being done, because obviously things like Off Liberty or some of the other tools that let you just grab the audio or grab the video from YouTube. To me, if you grab that and then maybe upload it to SoundCloud, people could do the time-stamped comments and things like that. I think that's a really engaging idea and I'm very intrigued about the idea of how we split these conversations up and make them more bite-sized. An hour is great if you have an hour, but if I have 5 minutes, I want to also engage in these conversations.
But that's what the research, so we do the Literacy Research Association show. We bring in like a couple scholars in an area and they talk for an hour. It's good. It's great for PD. It's great for a class where you say we're going to talk about critical literacy, but people don't sit around and watch an hour. And even like the Twit Network, all those shows, people go in and they'll take a whole long show of an hour or longer and they'll grab little 3, 4, 5 minute segments and then put those up on YouTube. Those get watched. And so that's the issue, is most of the research in online video says that people are watching maybe 10 to 30 seconds of your clip, and the people that watch more will watch a couple minutes. So how do you take something like what we were just in, break it down effectively while not really giving editorial preference, but break it down and make it available and accessible to everybody?
Absolutely, and I think that accessibility is really, really important. The last thing that I'll put in here, and then I want to shoo you all out of here so that the video doesn't get any longer. You can reflect upon this session, those of you who are hanging out still, and I would love for you to submit for a badge. It's on Peer-to-Peer University. Please go ahead and do that. And thank you so much for taking your time. And the monocle mustache are for Jay Veen, and the party hat is for Andrew Stillman. Happy birthday, man.
Thank you.
See you guys
Thanks
later.
for having us on.
See you guys.
Thanks, Ben.